Sobriety Essays number 17, Thanksgiving Contrast.
By Chuck H. Sobriety date April 19, 1984. My name is Chuck and I am an alcoholic. I just celebrated my 5th sober Thanksgiving, 1998. I spent some time reflecting on the past and how it was this time, and there was a contrast. My wife and I and a family friend went to Big Bear to spend a 4-day holiday weekend. One of the many things that this program has given me is the ability to take the action required to enjoy life. I woke up Thursday morning at 3 a.m. I don't know why. The committee, thinking, wasn't into anything. I was just wide awake. I got up and fixed some coffee, started a fire, got out a good book. I figured I'd read and be comfortable until I got sleepy and go back to bed. All of a sudden, I got this thought. The committee was saying, why don't we go fishing? You always wanted to be the first one on the lake and you have a lantern. Why not? It just seemed like a good idea. So I got up and off I went. Contrast. If I woke up 3 a.m. 5 years ago, it was because I needed a drink to dull the committee thinking, so I could go back to sleep. To keep the committee from thinking how bad the marriage had gotten and how my boss didn't understand me and what a miserable failure at life I had become. Before I got to the program, I can remember thinking all the things that I'd like to do and all the things I should do, and nothing ever happened because that's all I did was sit and think. Arriving down at the lake, 3:45 a.m., I got the lantern lit and I walked down to the water's edge. Here I am carrying a lantern in one hand and my fishing gear in the other, and it's 28 degrees. And I just busted up laughing as one member of the committee says, "Chuck, you're 51 years old and you're nuttier than a fruitcake." I was dressed for the cold and I was enjoying my own company. That was the real miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was 6:15 before some other fishermen showed up, and 8:30 before I quit and went back to the cabin. The fishing had been good, and I went back to a cabin where my wife would be getting up, and I had a marriage that was good and it was working. I felt good inside. Contrast. On my first sober Thanksgiving, I was 7 months sober, and the wife the night before had informed me that she was filing for a divorce. She moved out of the bedroom because I refused to move, and when she asked. Growth? We went to some friend's house for a Thanksgiving dinner and played the part of Mr. and Mrs. Perfect Couple. We arrived just shortly after noontime, and my friend was on his way to getting drunk. His wife was on his back about his drinking, and all I could see is how I used to be like that and how my wife was always like his wife the year before. I was uncomfortable, for all I could see in him was me. In the late afternoon, we started a little poker game, and I was becoming more and more uncomfortable with me as my friend couldn't remember what game we were playing, couldn't make up his mind what to bet. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore, and I asked my wife to take me home, for I desperately needed an AA meeting. It was a podium participation meeting that night, and I was the first to share. I remember as I spoke today, as clear as it was yesterday. I was contrite uncontrollably, and I said, "It looks like I'm going to go through a divorce, and I just don't want to drink over it." A lot of love filled the room that night. People shared, most with practical suggestions, but there were two that shared that night, and what they shared is still with me today. One shared about "this too will pass." The other one shared about acceptance. So here I arrived back at the cabin that is filled with warmth and love and a marriage that is working. It started to snow. I built up the fire and from time to time walked to the window and watched the snowfall, and wondering at the beauty of nature and how kind God had been to me and my family. It may sound funny to some, unless you have been a drunk like I was a drunk, but I carved up the turkey. I enjoyed being able to carve and serve the turkey. By early evening I had eaten all I could eat. I had rested all I could rest. I had read all I could read. Most of all, I had been cooped up with two women who had been talking all day long. I didn't need a meeting, I wanted a meeting. So out into the snow and on with snow chains. I have been going to Big Bear long enough in sobriety to know where and what AA meetings were available and what the schedule was. It was a step study meeting that night, and the place was filled with out-of-towners like myself. I found a seat and thought to myself the perfect ending to a perfect day would be the reading and discussion of Step 6. That is exactly what step was read and talked about. Contrast. When I had gotten out of the hospital after being jammed through the first 5 steps in 28 days, I made the conscious effort to sit down and work Step 6. I read where this was the step that separated the men from the boys, and I hit a wall. I didn't know how to be a man. I didn't know how to be honest with myself. I started drinking about 16 years of age, and I believe I quit growing emotionally at that age. In the next 8 months of being sober, I consciously sat down 3 times to work Step 6 and hit the same wall each time. I began to think I was one of those who was unable to be honest with themselves. Something happened during my 9th month that changed from being sober to having sobriety. I ended up back in the hospital for a day to sit on my hands, not out of fear of drinking, out of sheer fear of dying. My sponsor came down that afternoon and we talked. I remember today absolutely nothing that was said in that room. I did find out about love that day. I mean, what love is all about. That man sitting across from me at the table loved me unconditionally. He loved me when I couldn't love myself. He didn't want a thing from me. He only wanted something for me. He gave his most precious gift to me, his time. I learned more about love that afternoon than 20 years of marriage had taught me. I woke up in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous a couple of days later and literally discovered I was sober 9 months, and I had a program. At the next step study I went to, I discovered the answer I needed most for me, honesty. I had placed as my number 1 character defect. I did not know how to be honest. I played games in my head for so long that I could not tell the real from the unreal. I laid out my problem before the group, and a couple old-timers made a suggestion. Since I could not swallow total honesty right then, why not just not lie and be as honest as I was capable of being right at this moment? That was the answer I was looking for. Just being honest as I could right at this moment. Somewhere from that moment to this, I watched as my marriage turned good. My job got better. My friends became more numerous, and the gifts of gifts. I felt good about me most of the time. So I had a beautiful Thanksgiving 1998. I will leave you with a couple of thoughts that my sponsor gave me that I still have. This is a program of progress, not one of perfection. And don't leave 5 minutes before the miracle.